Hey everyone, and welcome back to World of Warcraft Legion. Today we're going to be talking about Mythic dungeons, which Blizzard have finally unlocked. This system, previously referred to as Challenge Mode, represents Blizzard's plan to make dungeon content last far longer and have meaningful difficulty throughout the expansion. The initial test of it is rather simple, and it's only within the Halls of Valor instance, the same instance that I did as a part of the Legion dungeon race. Mythic dungeons start off with your keystone terminology that will be familiar to the Diablo 3 players. Indeed, this system is very reminiscent of the Greater Rifts in Diablo. So you will acquire one of these keystones through doing content. I don't know what content yet, since they're handed out for free by an alpha-only vendor. Anyway, when you enter the dungeon on Mythic difficulty, which you select on your character portrait, you will find a Challenger's pedestal at the entrance. You are then able to slot your keystone into that pedestal. This causes the instance to reload and the Mythic run to begin. So while there is a timer involved, it's not like the previous challenge mode system. If you do not beat the timer, and in this run we didn't, you still get the loot. However, if you do beat the timer, you will upgrade the level of your keystone. This is where the scaling difficulty comes into play. In a default Mythic dungeon, mobs will do 100% damage and have 100% health, as you would expect. With a level 1 keystone, they will have an additional 9% health and damage. At level 3, that equates to a 26% multiplier, and at level 6, a keystone has a 59% multiplier. So if you do complete the run under the par time, your keystone is upgraded, and that upgraded keystone will be for a randomly rolled Legion dungeon. That's in order to keep the gameplay a bit more varied and prevent people from just simply farming up a single instance all the time because it's the most efficient. Now that isn't everything. We also have to deal with affixes. These are properties that a keystone can have, which will modify the rules of your run. Keystones from level 1 to 2 have none, keystones for level 3 and 5 have 1, and keystones from level 6 upwards have 2 affixes. The keystones above level 3 can have one of the following affixes: Tyrannical, which causes bosses to have significantly more health and do more damage; Bolstering, which will cause trash mobs to buff nearby allies' health and damage whenever they are defeated. There's also Raging, which causes non-boss enemies to enrage at low health, doing double damage until they're killed. And finally, Teaming, which will cause additional trash mobs to be present throughout the dungeon, and the kill count requirement for the dungeon is also increased. That doesn't sound as fun to me because I don't really enjoy slaying my way through trash all the time. Anyway, moving on to level 6, you've got the more nasty ones. Necrotic. Enemy melee attacks supply a stacking debuff that does damage and reduces healing received. Obviously, if you let that stack up really high on your tank's going to be completely boned, which is a pretty bad situation to be in, so it will be interesting to see how the balance for that is overall. There's Volcanic, which will cause flames to appear beneath the feet of distant players. There's Skittish, which will cause tanks to generate much less threat. And then finally there is Decay, which causes all players to suffer damage over time while the challenge is active. Now, let's just go through the 8 potential affix combinations that can happen. We've got Teaming and Skittish. Now, this will give you loads of trash mobs and cause mobs to get far less threat on the tank, so that will certainly be fun in an AoE situation. Another example, we've got Raging and Necrotic. Raging means the non-boss enemies will enrage at low health, doing double damage, and then Necrotic will apply that that debuff to whoever they attack, which stacks up in terms of damage over time and will also reduce healing received. That will actually make trash mobs, or trash packs even, quite difficult. We also have Bolstering and Decay. So Decay just means everyone suffers a dot. Then Bolstering causes enemies to buff other enemies when they die. That overall just means it's going to be a bit harder to make your way through the dungeon. Tyrannical and Volcanic. So Tyrannical, of course, just makes the bosses have more health and damage. And then Volcanic means that you will additionally be having eruptions of flame coming out underneath your feet, which is nice and convenient. Teaming and Necrotic. So teaming means even more trash mobs. Necrotic means loads of stacking debuffs from enemy melee attacks, so that's going to make sort of mass AoE tanking quite a bit harder. Raging and Volcanic. So Raging is just the enrage, which causes double damage. Volcanic, fire under your feet, maybe not the most scary combination. Now, bolstering and skittish is a fun enough combination, so bolstering causes enemies to buff other enemies whenever they die, and then skittish means that tank threat generation will be a lot less. What this means is you could end up in a situation where that buff has been applied a few times. If a mob gets loose because somebody is over DPSing, then perhaps that could lead to people getting killed pretty quickly. And then we also have tyrannical and decay. So tyrannical just makes the bosses a lot more powerful in terms of their health and damage, and then decay means you will take damage over time when the challenge is active. That is going to make some boss fights really quite tricky. From what I hear, right now on the alpha, Tyrannical and Decay are the current affixes that are live, and it is apparently, according to Ian Hazzikostas, very, very hard. So that's kind of interesting. Now, these dungeons are set to a weekly lockout, and the way the system works is that every week you will have one combination of these rolling out. That seems to be the way they're doing it based on what they've said in the blue post. That's actually changing every 12 hours for testing purposes on the alpha. So now that I've explained this system, did I enjoy it? Well, we were not doing a massively hard keystone run or anything like that. We were just doing a level 1 keystone, but certainly mistakes were punished, and we had a few wipes along the way. Things like standing in the fire were fairly punishing, as they should be. Balance within the dungeon was not great, honestly. That just comes down to a dungeon tuning thing, with the second last boss being an absolute face roll, basically in regards to his amount of health, not really the amount of damage that he did, in comparison to all the other ones. I actually got one shot near the end of it. He essentially did a charge into melee when I was a melee character who was in melee, so I didn't really have a lot of time to react to it, which is a bit of a strange one. But overall, it was very doable, but definitely mistakes would be punished. Though I do really like how the scaling works, because it means that all of these dungeons will increase in difficulty until they are literally unclearable. This is great, and it will allow for everyone to have meaningful dungeon gameplay regardless of their gear level and progression in the game. I also really like the affix system, and what's most interesting to me is when the affix combos have a particularly evil synergy, or even just an interesting synergy. What could be a problem is maybe a combination of, say, certain affixes punishing certain comps harder than others, but if you're getting into difficult content, especially pushing the really high levels, I think that's actually a fair expectation. Now, I'll be doing more testing of this system as it expands across other dungeons and they beef out the rewards. Right now, there are no rewards for it, but for now, that's it for the initial video that is meant to just get everybody up to speed on this system and actually be able to show you some in-game UI and things like that that are to do with it. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.